Hey guys, welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ, and at the end of my last video, I said I didn't want to test Cyberpunk 2077 anymore. I just wanted to play it. But I got a ton of questions. Emails, actually. So guys, if you have questions, just ask in the comments. I'm actually much faster at responding to those. Plus, everyone can benefit from it. Anyway, the questions I'm getting are about the resolution scaling settings in Cyberpunk 2077 and basically why I didn't use it. The only real answer I got is my goal was to see if the GPUs I tested could run at 60 FPS at 1080p. Once you enable FidelityFX, you no longer are gaming at native 1080p, and understandably, a lot of gamers didn't quite understand this, so in this video, I'm gonna try to explain what Dynamic and Static FidelityFX CAS is and how it works. So let's just get right into it, and simply put, FidelityFX CAS essentially does two things. First, it scales the resolution of the game, and second, it sharpens the image. Let's look at the resolution scaling first. So when I'm playing the game at 1920 by 1080, the GPU is rendering every single frame of the game at 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, meaning it renders 2,073,600 pixels every single frame of the game. Now, if I go into the settings and enable Static FidelityFX CAS, and set my resolution scale to 90, now the GPU renders every frame at 1728 pixels by 972 pixels. So now the GPU only has to render just under 1.7 million pixels, which is 20% less pixels, but you don't see this. I mean, the image doesn't actually get smaller on your screen because the software or the game engine then upscales the image back to 1080p. Now, the GPU is still only rendering 1.7 million pixels, but the image needs to fill the over 2 million pixels on your screen. So let's look at that individual frame at the 90% size and zoom way in so we can see the individual pixels. Now, the size of the individual pixel on your screen is fixed. It can't change, and each pixel can only light up in a single color, so in order for the frame to upscale back up to fill your screen, it just can't make each pixel 10% bigger. So the software just spreads the color of the individual pixels out a bit more. Now, it's not calculating and drawing each pixel. That's what rendering is, and the GPU does that. Here, the game is just looking at a pixel and the pixels around it and estimating what the new color should be, and estimation is a whole lot faster than calculation. But as a result of this estimation, the image loses a lot of detail and basically looks blurry because all the colors that make up the mosaic kind of blend together. So that's where the second part, CAS, or Contrast Adaptive Sharpening, comes in. Now the image is sharpened to bring back some of the detail lost in the upscaling, like this. Now you see that the contrast, or the degree of difference in color from one pixel to the next, has been increased. Now we can more clearly see the right side of this face is more brightly lit, and there's more noticeable shadows around the eyes and the corners of the nose. So let's zoom out, and this is the image upscaled without sharpening, and this is with sharpening. So feel free to slide the timeline back and forth to see before and after, before and after. So that's Static FidelityFX CAS. Every single frame is rendered at whatever percent of the native resolution you select. So if you set your resolution 1080p and the Static FidelityFX CAS to 90%, then every frame renders at 728 by 972 and is upscaled to 1080p and sharpened. The other option, Dynamic FidelityFX CAS, does the same thing, but instead of a set resolution scale for each and every frame, you select a target frame rate, a maximum resolution scale, and a minimum resolution scale, and then the GPU can render each frame at differing resolutions on the fly, depending on how taxing the particular scene is to maintain your target frame rate. So in my example, if there's a part of the game that your GPU can easily render 60 FPS at full 1080p, then those frames will just be rendered at 100%. But if there's a section where my frame rate will drop below 60 FPS, then those frames will be rendered as low as 90% or anywhere in between. It's important to remember that the target FPS works in conjunction with resolution scaling. If you can't maintain your target FPS at 100% resolution, just setting a target FPS won't work here. You have to set at least a minimum resolution at which you can achieve the target FPS. So, should you enable these options? Well, I would say if you don't need to, don't, because a rendered frame is always going to look better than an estimated frame. Except in Cyberpunk 2077, there is no option by default to change or disable anti-aliasing. Temporal anti-aliasing, or TAA, is enabled by default, and there's no menu option to change or disable it. You can disable it in your GPU settings, but whether you need TAA is really dependent on your system and if your frame rate is high enough to overcome the aliasing artifact. But regardless, TAA does blur things up, and even if you don't need the resolution scaling, the contrast adaptive sharpening can overcome the blurring from anti-aliasing. So if you enable Static FidelityFX CAS and leave the resolution at 100%, you should get some sharpening without the scaling. Now, I haven't had enough time with the game to test whether there's any visual improvement with this or if there's any performance loss, because remember now, the GPU renders the frame and then sharpening has to happen. I'll test this out when I actually get to play the game for, fun, not work. If it doesn't do the trick, I can try hardware sharpening options too, because even with motion blur off, this game still has quite a bit of blurring, especially as you change directions quickly or start to sprint. But you guys probably have more practical experience or will gain more than me, so if you have any input on that, drop a comment below. Now for the rest of the video, I just have some in-game examples of FidelityFX CAS in action, so I'm just gonna drop the game clips in for you to check out as you see fit. No commentary, it's pretty self-explanatory. There will be 3 clips of me running around the block in Little China for a few minutes. It's pretty boring, but you'll get to see the FPS fluctuate as I move from scene to scene. So first, without resolution scaling enabled, then static 90%, and then dynamic 100 max 90 min with a 60 FPS target. I'll also include some combat action in the rescue mission with dynamic enabled at 60 FPS and Vsync locked at 59 FPS, which should give me the smoothest, lowest latency experience possible. This is all using an RX 5700 Ryzen 7 3700X, 16 gigabytes of DDR4, 3600 megahertz memory, 1080p ultra preset with film grain and motion blur disabled because I just don't like those effects. There are chapter markers below, so you can skip to whatever you like. I'll try to find a good soundtrack. I'm feeling like some rock, maybe a little metal. Anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and all that. And that's all I really got to say in this one. So enjoy the show.
Some of heroes, wild mortals and the ni seré el último, pero sé que lo gozaré. Para serte sincero, un Dios el que te enseñó lo que puedes hacer con mi piel. Yeah, 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 yeah. Baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos a matar, yeah, toda esa curiosidad. Baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos a matar, yeah, toda esa curiosidad. Solo yo sé de ese lunar, solo tú comes el pastel. Con estilo siempre te vas, pero te vienes con placer. Me dijiste no quiero nada, pero quieres todo, mujer. Baby, yo te hago soñar algo más rico que la miel, mi droga que te legalicen. No digamos el pecado, que hay cosas que no se dicen. Y en la piel tú y yo jugando, baby, ¿para qué te dices? Y tú solo dices que quieres más, que matemos la curiosidad. Eso hacemos, baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos a matar, yeah, toda esa curiosidad. Baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos a matar, yeah, toda esa curiosidad. Yeah, aquí viviendo roce, estamos solitos, ya son más de las 12. Pegándote bien lento, baby, para que tú goces. No somos algo serio, pero bien si me conoces. Yeah, tú eres el antojo de mi vida. De tanto que te pienso ya no encuentro la salida. Pero no somos nada, nada, girl. Pero no somos nada, nada, girl, yeah. Tú mi droga que te legalicen. No digamos el pecado, que hay cosas que no se dicen. Y en la piel tú y yo jugando, baby, ¿para qué te dices? Y tú solo dices que quieres más, que matemos la curiosidad. Eso hacemos, baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos a matar, yeah, toda esa curiosidad. Baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos a matar, yeah, toda esa curiosidad. Ni el primero, ni seré el último, pero sé que lo gozaré. Para serte sincero, un Dios el que te enseñó lo que puedes hacer con mi piel. Yeah, 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 yeah. Baby, si se nos da, yeah, será lo que será, yeah, los dos vamos